This is Jake Barker with Golden Fox Farms doing our equipment videos today, and this time we're going to put together a wired wax frame the old-fashioned way with nails. This is what we did before we had decent plastic foundation, before we had pneumatic staplers, before we had great glues. So it's a rather slow process. It is a process, and it requires a lot of odds and ends. You need your hammer, your crimp tool, your eyelets, your eyelet tool, your wire, and your assorted nails and a speed square, in addition to the foundation itself. Now, the top bar is special for wax. A wax frame uses what's called a wedge top bar. And this piece here that's loose, that's cut, is the wedge, as opposed to a groove top bar, which just has the groove cut and no other cuts on it. And the first thing we can do is snap off that wedge. If you're doing a couple of these, you can just snap that off by hand. And then you would check this for any big burrs or anything like that spot right there. We might want to cut that down using a utility knife. There's just that high spot there that didn't quite come off freely. Get that out of the way. Also knowing where these frames come from, these were cut a little sloppy, so sometimes they need a little bit of help. Okay, so we've prepared the top bar. We need to prepare the end bars. With wire foundation, you want to use these little eyelets to reinforce these holes, otherwise the wire will cut into the wood when you tension it. I have this eyelet tool to drive in these eyelets. These holes are 1/8 inch diameter. They will come cut from the manufacturer generally if you're ordering the right size end bars for your waxed wire foundation. Okay, so we've set our eyelets. Now we'll actually assemble the frame. I assemble them upside down, so the top bar goes down, end bars go on with the eyelets facing towards the outside, and then our bottom bar. This is a groove bottom bar. I prefer a split bar that has this totally open, let the wax just hang free, but this is what we have, so that's what we'll use today. So we'll dry fit this all together, take our speed square, to make sure we're pretty square, and then we'll take a nail in from the top. The nails you use for this are 1 1/4 inch wire nails. If you pre-drill these, you will have better results because I'm more likely to have splits and blowouts and cracks just using nails. You can also glue these for a lot stronger results, and that's really recommended using something like Titebond 3, which is a waterproof and food-safe glue. Alright, so that's done, and both of those nails decided to come out. That's just the grain of the wood working against me. And make sure we're still reasonably square, and we're reasonably square. I'll send in another one of these 1 1/4 nails. Alright. Now what some people will do is they'll actually take the second nail in from the outside of the end. And we'll go ahead and do that. Why not? Just to show a different way of doing things. You do want to make sure the nail is short enough not to pass all the way through and nail your frame to the table, as I'm sure many people have done. So now that the bottom's done, we need to nail our top. In general, people will pass one nail in from the top going down into the end frame. We'll go ahead and do that on the other side. And then they'll pass a nail in from the end bar into the top bar through here. Now you have to be aware, since this wedge is cut out, we can only do this nail on the back side of this thing. And there's not really a great way to get these in. I usually have them at an angle so the hammer has an easier time getting to the nail. Alright, and And that puts that nail into shear, so if you try to push this apart, it's rather strong. Without that nail, sometimes these things will come apart rather easily. And you don't want that happening in a hive. These frames, when loaded, will have probably 5 to 6 pounds of wax or brood on them, and honey for that matter. So that's why we need to do these end nails. Now, since we have good glues and stuff, absolutely use glues. They'll be a lot stronger for you at the end of the day. But we're pretending this is old school and we don't have those glues. Now the frame's nailed together, we need to wire it. I'm going to start by putting a short nail in to the end bar, whose purpose will soon be revealed. We'll take our wire, which is 26 gauge. It's steel tinned. It's steel. It's been coated to keep it from rusting quite so readily. And we're going to pass it through this frame on a loop. A medium or a shallow, they'll usually have 2 wire passes. A deep frame can have 4, but most people will just use the middle 2. Those are the ones that are really important. That said, I don't try to extract deep frames because I find they tend to fall apart in the extractor, at least for wired ones. I'm going to go around that nail with this wire 6 times. And then I'm going to take some wire cutters, cut off my loose tail, and then I'm going to drive that nail home. That's going to hold that wire fast. Now I need to put in a second nail. I'll do it down here. And now I'm going to put tension on this thing. I'm going to pull the wire tight and push against the frame. That's going to put these wires tight. We need these wires tight for the actual wax application. And while holding that, I'm going to start wrapping around this nail. Now I'm not going to be able to hold that as tight as I had it there. That's okay. We have a trick to fix that. Thank you for holding the back end of the frame, Melissa. And I went around that nail 6 times, so at least I counted 6 times. And I'll cut that wire free. Now I'm holding the wire and the spool together with one hand. If I didn't do this, the wire would come unspooled from the spool and turn into a slinky on your floor. You want to always hold on to that thing and police the wire because it's easier than not. Okay. Now I need to finish driving that nail in to lock in the wire. And now we need to finish tensioning these wires. They're a little loose right now. We want them banjo tight. And to do that, I'm using this crimping tool. It has these roller heads that puts a wave into the wire. And by doing that, I've tightened those wires up enough to where they'll work. They're very nice and taut. Now, we'll lay our foundation in there. We use a wired waxed foundation, a hooked foundation. And the hook refers to these little tails of the wire that stand proud and at a right angle to the foundation itself. That parks in there and gets locked in by the wedge. I'll point the bottom bar away from me and slide the foundation into that groove of the bottom bar. It takes a little time to figure this part out because usually the foundation is not perfectly straight and the wires will catch everything they touch. That went rather well. It's in. So now I'll install the wedge. To install the wedge, we put it inside. Sometimes you have to snip this thing a little short. And we fasten it to the top bar using short nails, little half-inch nails. You do need to take your time with this step because if you smack the foundation with your hammerhead, you get to start over. The foundation will shatter. With how cold it is, it will. That nail is not going to behave for me, is it? All right, there's one. Melissa's seen me do this more times than she'd like to admit. And this is where the frame falls off the table when I look for the last nail. And one last one. Okay, that'll lock that wax in. That wax won't fall out. Now we're not quite done. If we just put this in a hive, this wax could get hot and bow. And if it bows, we're going to lose our bee space and we're going to get trouble in the hive. So we want to embed this wax into this wire, make it one unit. There's a tool called a Spur embedding tool that you would push in and lock the wax together. It kind of pinches the wax around the wire. Now that's a special tool. We don't have that special tool. What we do have is a 12-volt battery charger. And that's what we'll use to embed the wax. What I'll do is put my frame on the table, take a piece of wood I can apply light pressure with, and then I'll take my battery charger ends. I'll hook one wire on. Sometimes it takes a moment. There we go. And I'll put a little pressure on. I'm going to touch the wires together, and it'll heat the wires pretty rapidly. You can watch and see it heat up. You do it for as little time as you need to because it can totally burn through the wax. Here we go. And you can see the wire started coming through that wax. That's why we can see the wire in there now. If you just do it for that brief little period of time, that wire will park inside the wax. It's probably already cooled. I'm going to remove my bar, and we'll have to see what we did. And we can see that wire is quite literally inside the wax. And that's a completed wired wax frame. Thank you for joining us.